at our actual project here. So let's close hidden windows. All right, we get back to the only things that I have open. So you see I had, from that space frame tool, I had 1, 2, 3, 4 families had to create that before I got to the actual project. Right, so it takes a little while to kind of jump into. So let's look at this actual Sweetbird file. We do have some doors in place, right? So the door is kind of like a family, right? It's a hosted family. It's hosted to a wall. When I place a door, so I go to architecture, and I want to place a door. I can't place a door, you know, in the floor, right? I would have to do a floor-based door if I wanted a hatch panel or something like that. It's only going to track itself and allow me to place it inside walls. So if we look at the way it's handled, right, the door in 3D looks significantly different than the door in 2D, and there's a reason for that. And that's because right now we're only looking at line data. We're not looking at the 3D geometry of the door. So let's go ahead and edit a standard door family. So edit that and open her up. Right, and if I go to the family types, anytime I open any new family, I'm going to look at what is actually in that family in terms of parameters. So I'm going to click on family types and say, okay, what am I dealing with? What kind of monster do I got here? Right, so here's visible. Wow. So in this case, right, you can see I have all kinds of visibility parameters already starting inside this door family. So and this is set up for, I believe Zach set this up for 88, right? So I'm turning on front approach, pull side, so on and so forth. So those are just lines of data that show up in certain aspects. So right now in the 3D view of this door, if I select that outside trim, and if I right click on it, there's another kind of hierarchy of visibility happening that you really don't see, and it's called the object visibility. And if I go and click on the visibility set from the right click operation, I get this little dialog box. So what this is saying to me is it's saying this piece of geometry is only going to be visible in the front and back segments and the left and right. So that's basically saying in all elevation views and section views, I'm going to be able to see this object. And I'm going to be able to see it at all these detail levels, right? So remember, we can turn on hatches and turn off hatches. This is kind of what's happening, is within that hatch it has a Boolean toggle that says, can I see you in the coarse view? Can I see you in the medium view? Can I see you in the fine view? Yes for all three. Now, what it's not visible in is I don't see that trim piece in the plan view. When I looked in plan in the Sweetbird project, when I placed that, I did not see that plan. I did not see the trim in that plan. That's because right here, it's deselected in the file, right? If I look at the door itself, so the actual 3D geometry of the door, and I right-click and look at that's visibility, it's also not visible in plan. And chances are none of this 3D geometry is ever visible in plan. And that's because in plan we're using symbolic lines, right? So if I go to the sheet view, go to my floor plan, go to my ground floor, and here's all that chaos that's happening in this, right? So if we look at the door swing here, so here's my door swing. My door swing I didn't see in that 3D view, and that's because it's called a symbolic line, right? And most lines start out as model lines, right? So a model line, if I convert this line back to a model line, and I go back to the 3D view of it, I should now see that plan. See, I see that swing now in view. If I convert it, and that's a model line. So a model line is always going to be visible in 3D views, 2D views, every view. If I convert this line back to a symbolic line, so I click on the convert line tool. When I convert that back, so it's a Boolean toggle, I am one or I am the other one, and I look at it in 3D, I no longer see that view. So what's happening is in plan, all I'm doing is taking geometry. We know that this is my door geometry. I need to see that in some elevation, so that's why I create the geometry. But in plan, I want to see that door open and swinging because that's the way we do doors in plans. So even the door itself here is a symbolic line. It's just a series of lines. And in plan, this is grayed out, so it's kind of hard to see on the screen with the colors, but this is actually grayed out, indicating in plan I'm not going to be able to see it. These guys, if I right click on it and look at their visibility, they're always visible, right, because they're symbolic lines. Show only if instance is cut, etc. Again, symbolic lines will only show up in plans or 2D views. They will never show up in 3D views. Does that make sense? Other things about it are subcategories of lines. So how we handle line weights in this case is handled by subcategories. So if I select the door swing here and I look at its subcategory, it's of a subcategory of plan swing. Right? And I have a bunch of other ones in here. If I look at the door has another type of object. And that's handling how we look at line weights, how we look at object styles. We can, if we have it as a subcategory of panel, we can then assign a line weight to that subcategory. So let's make our own little kind of symbol for this door, right? Doors by nature can host a different symbol. Let's just kind of draw something in place and create our own subcategory with it. So I'm going to go ahead and create, and I'm going to do a model line. And I'm just going to make a rectangle. Actually, let's make it so it's visible. Let's make it a pentagon. Let's make the pentagon. So I'm going to do 5-sided pentagon. And it goes right there. And then if I tab through and select that chain of lines, right now it's on the subcategory of doors. So how do I define a new subcategory? How do I define a new line weight for our custom symbol? Right? So I would go to VV. And even in families, I have visibility graphics. Now, anything that happens in the Revit model, like let's say I changed what hidden line's value was inside the family. If that hidden line value is the same in the Revit project's still going to trump what's in the family. So the project always trumps what's in the family. In the case that I need to have, like right now I'm in doors, I need a subcategory of doors that handles my custom element. So I'm going to go to object style. So we touched a little bit on this yesterday. Here's where the practical sense of it comes into play. I'm going to go into object styles, and now I can create a new subcategory called custom symbol, custom item, we'll call it custom item. And then that custom item, maybe I want to give it a red color, so I'm going to make it red is my line color. What is my line pattern, right? So I can do different patterns with it. I can do new patterns with it. Unfortunately, at this level, you would want to do the line pattern in the Revit project, not in the family, right? In this case, we'll just leave it as, let's do it center. And then if I had a material or if it was an option, I would do that. And then it's projection. What is my line weight? So as we go up, it's going to get thicker on line weight. So let's make it like pretty thick so we can see it. We'll click apply. We'll click OK. So now in my visibility graphics, I see custom item as a subcategory. I'll click OK. And I can change my lines now to be on that custom item. Cut, custom item projection. So in our case, we're going to leave it as custom item cut. If I do TL for thin lines, it'll bring up what that line weight looks like. So we're going to do two things with it now that we have it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I tabbed and selected all the lines. And then where's the next dialog box that I'm supposed to hit?
Oh, yep, subcategory. So I'm going to take it. So just like I was going to change this layer, subcategory is kind of like a layer. I'm going to say that. And especially for line data, this is how we handle line styles and line weights, is through subcategories. Because you still need that idea of a layer structure, right?
So how do you add a new subcategory?
Okay, so again, to recap, so we don't ever cut through a line, right? So that's why I assign the projection value. So I have two items. I have a custom item cut, custom item projection that we defined a line weight to. Let's say on the door, right? The door should be able to, well, basically we never cut through a line, but I should be able to begin assigning subcategories within this as well. So I go to properties. It has a subcategory of panel, right? If I want to pick up something to do with like I want to outline my door in that red value, I would turn it as custom item that we just created. And then if I go to 3D, I'll see my door pick up that projection or that cut of that. Make sense? So like earlier today when we were doing the custom door inside the curtain wall, right? The values were green on those handles, and that's because of that value that was placed on it. They were placed on the wrong subcategory, or a subcategory that was just showing up as green for that case. Okay? Let's go ahead and load that in. So I'm going to load that into my SGA arc, and then you're going to see kind of what happens here. I'm going to overwrite the existing version, and then in my plan I should now see my custom kind of graphic come in. Now it's got to populate all those other doors, which is why it's going to take it a minute, but there we go. So there's my object. If I go to 3D now, because I didn't convert those lines, when I go and look at this door, I'm going to have to spin around and kind of get a place where I can see it here. You can see I still see that symbol in 3 dimensions. So in order to not see that symbol in 3 dimensions, what do you think I got to do?
Edit the custom item style?
No. Make it a symbolic line. A+, 2 A pluses for you. I used to do gold star charts. Super awesome way to get people to respond. Okay, so exactly, we're going to convert that line. So right now the model line, because it is a model line, it shows up in all views. In this case, I'm going to convert it. It's just going to say Revit converted 5 lines. I say OK. When I reload that in, it'll only show up in my plan views. If I overwrite it, there we go. Makes it disappear.
So this goes back and forth?
Yep.
Okay, so
Sure does.
is there a way to tell which, I guess if you hover, you see it down here on the bottom left, to see what the current state is versus what you're converting to and from? Yeah.
With the lines?
Yeah.
No, unfortunately there's not. What you can do though in the family is you kind of just check it. So if I select my lines, I should see down at the bottom properties, whether it's model or symbolic, it'll tell me whether it's symbolic or model.
Well, I was noticing the dialog box shows if you hover over it.
Yep, shows symbolic
Shows it,
lines.
yeah.
And that's for anything. If I hover over it, that's your information bar. So what I see here is symbolic lines, symbolic lines. If I hover over the basic wall, it's going to show me at the bottom basic wall. So, yeah, the information bar is helpful. I'm still in the habit of not using it, and you can call me a newbie or whatever, but it's just I just never got in the habit of using it. I hover over the object and wait till the object comes across. Just because it's so small, right? Like my head has to turn to look at that, and I think that's why I never do it. So, okay, makes sense. Good on that. And tomorrow we'll get into definite like annotations, starting to draft some, right, and really understanding line weights, because you guys aren't fully there with the Revit line weights yet. So a lot of your time will be spent fudging with those as well too. Alrighty, cool, rock and roll. All right, so now let's get into, so that covers families, object settings. This is a real world family. The same stuff we just went over, we could do inside our parametric box. There's really not a reason for that in this case. It's just we had to go to another family to do that.
Sorry,
Yeah,
can
go
you
ahead.
change the visibility settings within the family or only in the project?
You can change in what case?
Like seeing for symbolic lines, seeing which symbolic lines you see in the plans, for instance. If you wanted to see the pull side ADA requirement for the door,
You would have to go to, well, you set up the ability to toggle it on and off in the family, and then load it in, and then you can control it in the project.
Okay, so you control it in the project, not...
Yep, exactly. You can always control it in the project. If you can get in the habit of good family editing, like a lot of people, like another thing about it is if I go back to this project, right, I can create families in place, right? But I can't save them out and I can't use them again on another project. So our parametric box, I can load into every project I want. If I make that same box right? So what I can do is go to component, and I can model in place. And I have the ability to load up family templates on the fly within the project, right? In this case, I'll just do a generic model. And I can model to my heart's content. I have the same ones here, but this, and it is a family, right? It'll categorize as a family. However, this item itself will not allow me, I can't use this again in another project, right? I'd have to cut and paste, essentially. I can never save it out as a family, even though it is categorized as a family, I will schedule it. And there are cases where you'll do this, like corners of mullions. If I have a weird angle on the way two curtain walls come together, I'm going to model that mullion in place. I'm not going to try and make a parametric mullion, right? I'm just going to model it and give it an extrusion, and then I'm going to call it a mullion, right? Because what I can also do is, let's say that now I've created this as a generic model. If I want it to be something else, and this matters when we're doing scheduling and categorizing the database, the button above the family types is going to be the family category and parameters. If I click on that, I can now categorize this as a curtain wall mullion or curtain wall family, or I can say that this is a column, right? Maybe I want to make this a column. And it's going to give me a warning and says it's going to behave in unpredictable ways. Well, I know, but I want it to be a column, right? And then I'm going to finish it. So now when I select it, right, even though I modeled it as a generic model, it's telling me it is now a structural column. Make sense? Cool. And then I can edit it. I push and pull it all I want.
Can you give that cut property, like, or layers or whatever?
Yeah, I can give it layers, everything else. So now, because it is a structural column, right, to change the layer properties of that, if I come into my structural columns area, and I want my cut, structural columns, I want my cut surface, my cut pattern to be different, right? So we'll swatch it. So because, even though I made it initially as a generic model, I'm able to then still categorize it as something different and what I actually want the use to be. It doesn't have to stay as the generic model, right? So, cool. And again, it'll go into all my calculations for materials and structural columns. It'll schedule as a structural column in that sense. I can also schedule generic models. How many generic models do I have in my project that I need to recategorize? Right, and we'll touch on that when we do schedules. I mean, schedules are huge. That's the information side, right? And we're kind of just getting geometry. So this is the modeling side. When I teach BIM, I go, you go building information modeling. If you think of it backwards, you go model, then information, then you get a building, right? So, the MIB. It's 336. So let's talk about mass modeling and divided surfaces.